Are you ready to dive into the dark corners of history that your school might have left out? History isn't just about heroes and triumphs. It's also about the chilling and disturbing moments that shaped our world. Welcome back to Helpful Think, and in today's video, we're going to peel back the curtain on 10 horrible historical facts they don't teach you in school. Get ready for a journey through the untold stories of suffering, cruelty, and resilience that have shaped the course of human history. Number 1. The Spanish Inquisition. To understand the magnitude of the Spanish Inquisition, we must first step back to late 15th century Spain. A time of religious fervor and shifting political alliances. It was in this tumultuous backdrop that the Spanish Inquisition, officially known as the Tribunal of the Holy Office of the Inquisition, was established in 1478 by Catholic monarchs Ferdinand II and Isabella I. Their goal, at least on the surface, was to ensure religious purity and unity within their newly unified kingdoms. At its core, the Spanish Inquisition was tasked with identifying and punishing those deemed heretics and devils who strayed from the doctrines of the Catholic Church. However, the Inquisition's reach soon extended far beyond religious matters. It became an instrument of control, censorship, and intimidation, wielding power over matters of ideology and culture. The Inquisition operated through a pervasive network of inquisitors and spies. These agents sought to uncover individuals suspected of practicing other faiths, secretly adhering to their old beliefs, or simply expressing dissenting views. Once accused, individuals faced a grim but rigorous interrogations, often accompanied by torture, designed to extract confessions. The penalties for a heresy were severe, including public humiliation, the confiscation of property, and, in the most horrifying cases, death by burning at the stake. The Spanish Inquisition was responsible for more than 32,000 deaths and was not abolished until 1834. This dark period in history left behind an indelible legacy of suffering and serves as a haunting testament to the dangers of unchecked religious and state power. Number 2. The Holodomor. In the early 1930s, a harrowing tragedy unfolded in Soviet Ukraine, a period known as the Holodomor. It was a man-made famine of staggering proportions, resulting in the deaths of millions due to forced collectivization policies imposed by the Soviet government. The term Holodomor itself translates to death by hunger in Ukrainian, a stark testament to the horrors that unfolded. At its core, the famine was the result of Joseph Stalin's brutal policies, aimed at rapidly industrializing the Soviet Union and suppressing Ukrainian nationalism. The Soviet government mandated the forced collectivization of agriculture, seizing private farms and grain stores, leaving farmers without the means to feed themselves or their communities. As a result, Ukraine, traditionally known as the breadbasket of Europe, was plunged into a catastrophic food shortage. The government's iron grip on information led to the suppression of news about the famine, both domestically and internationally. Ukrainians faced the grim choice of starvation or punishment for attempting to procure food. The desperation reached such horrifying depths that there were instances of cannibalism, as people resorted to eating the bodies of the deceased to survive. This tragic event would go on to claim roughly 3.9 million lives after lasting only just 1 year, from 1932 to 1933. Number 3. The Herero and Nama genocide. Step back in time to the early 20th century, in the remote corners of German-controlled Southwest Africa, where an unspeakable tragedy unfolded. The very first genocide of the 20th century. This grim chapter is known as the Herero and Nama genocide, a horrifying campaign perpetrated by German colonial forces between 1904 and 1908. The Herero and Nama genocide was rooted in an ideology of racial supremacy and territorial expansion. German settlers coveted the fertile lands and resources of Southwest Africa, and in their ruthless pursuit, they aimed to exterminate the Herero and Nama peoples, who resisted the colonial occupation. This genocide was marked by a relentless campaign of violence, mass killings, forced labor, and calculated poisoning of water sources. Between 24,000 and 100,000 Hereros and 10,000 Nama died in the genocide. The first phase of the genocide was characterized by widespread death from starvation and dehydration, due to the prevention of the Herero from leaving the Namib Desert by German forces. Once defeated, thousands of Hereros and Namas were imprisoned in concentration camps, where the majority died of diseases, abuse, and exhaustion. Yet, despite the staggering loss of life and the immense suffering inflicted, the Herero and Nama genocide remains an often overlooked chapter in history. It stands as a grim precursor to the larger-scale atrocities of the 20th century. Number 4. The Comfort Women. A story that was buried beneath the weight of history for far too long. A tale of the forced sexual slavery of thousands of women by the Japanese military during the war. Comfort girls were women and girls forced into sexual slavery by the Imperial Japanese Army in occupied countries and territories before and during World War II. The term comfort women is a translation of the Japanese word yonfu, which literally means comforting, consoling woman. During World War II, Japanese troops forced hundreds of thousands of women from Korea, the Philippines, Vietnam, China, and other countries into brothels, where they were sexually enslaved and repeatedly taken advantage of. In many cases, women were lured by false job openings for nurses and factory workers. Others were also lured by the promises of equity and sponsorship for higher education. Many women died or committed suicide due to brutal mistreatment and sustained physical and emotional distress. After the war, Japan's acknowledgement of the comfort women's plight was minimal, lacking a full apology and appropriate restitution, which damaged Japan's reputation in Asia for decades. Estimates vary as to how many women were involved, with most historians settling somewhere at a range of 50,000 to 200,000. Number 5. The Belgian Congo. King Leopold II, driven by a ruthless pursuit of wealth and power, seized control of the Congo in the late 19th century, disguising his brutal ambitions under the facade of a humanitarian mission. In reality, his rule was marked by an insatiable greed for the Congo's vast resources, particularly rubber and ivory. The Congolese people, however, paid a horrifying price for King Leopold's ambitions. Under his brutal regime, forced labor became the norm, with men, women, and children subjected to grueling work conditions. Those who failed to meet the impossibly high rubber quotas faced mutilation or death, while entire villages were held hostage to ensure compliance. It is estimated that 10 to 15 million people were killed as a result of actions or inactions of King Leopold. Number 6. Unit 731. Let's rewind back in time to a chilling period during World War II, where a covert and sinister unit operated in the shadows. Unit 731, officially known as the Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Department of the Kwantung Army, was a secret research and development unit of the Imperial Japanese Army. But behind this innocuous title lay an operation engaged in unfathomable horrors. Based in the Pingfang district of Harbin, in the puppet state of Manchukuo, now northeast China, Unit 731 conducted lethal human experimentation and biological weapons manufacturing. It is estimated to have killed between 200,000 to 300,000 people, though some estimates reach 500,000. The victims were subjected to a nightmare of experiments, disease injections, dehydration, biological weapons testing, vivisection, amputation, and more. They were dehumanized and internally referred to as logs. The unit's researchers were responsible for some of the most heinous war crimes committed by the Japanese military during World War II. Those captured by Soviet forces faced trials, but those captured by the United States were given immunity in exchange for the data from their human experiments, a dark chapter in post-war history. The American government not only concealed these atrocities, but also co-opted the researchers' bioweapons knowledge for their own biological warfare program. Number 8. The Witch Trials. In the midst of the early modern period, when superstitions cast long shadows and hysteria lurked around every corner, we embark on a chilling exploration into the witch trials and executions that scarred Europe and North America. It was an era where fear and ignorance held a vice grip on the collective psyche, leading to countless accusations of witchcraft. These witch trials, spanning from the 15th to the 17th century, witnessed a staggering death toll. Approximately 40,000 to 60,000 lives extinguished under the suspicion of practicing witchcraft. The trials unfolded primarily in Europe, with some of the harshest persecutions occurring in regions of the Holy Roman Empire. During this time, the concept of diabolical witchcraft emerged, challenging centuries of mainstream Christian doctrine that had denied the existence of witches. The idea that some individuals conspired with devils to gain supernatural powers took root, leading to a period of intense persecution that peaked between 1560 and 1630, with more than 40,000 deaths. Various acts of torture were used against accused witches to coerce confessions and cause them to provide names of alleged co-conspirators. Most historians agree that the majority of those persecuted in these witch trials were innocent of any involvement in devil worship. The torture of witches began to increase in frequency after 1468, when the Pope declared witchcraft to be crimen exceptum and thereby removed all legal limits on the application of torture in cases where evidence was difficult to find. In Italy, an accused witch was deprived of sleep for periods up to 40 hours. This technique was also used in England, but without a limitation on time. Sexual humiliation was used, such as forced sitting on red-hot stools with the claim that the accused woman would not perform sexual acts with the devil. In most cases, those who endured the torture without confessing were released. The use of torture has been identified as a key factor in converting the trial of one accused witch into a wider social panic, as those being tortured were more likely to accuse a wide array of other local individuals of also being witches. A variety of different punishments were employed for those found guilty of witchcraft, including imprisonment, flogging, fines, or exile. Non-capital punishment, especially for a first offence, was most common in England. Prior to 1542, church courts dealt with most cases in England, and most sanctions were directed more to penance and atonement than harsh punishments. Often the guilty party was ordered to attend the parish church, wearing a white sheet and carrying a wand, and swear to lead a reformed life. The Old Testament's Book of Exodus states, "Thou shalt not permit a sorceress to live." Many faced capital punishment for witchcraft, either by burning at the stake, hanging, or beheading. Similarly, in New England, people convicted of witchcraft were hanged. Number 9. The Bataan Death March. The transfer began on the 9th of April 1942 under the 3-month Battle of Bataan in the Philippines during World War II. The total distance marched from Mariveles to San Fernando and from the Copos train station to various camps was 65 miles. Sources also report widely differing prisoner-of-war casualties prior to reaching Camp O'Donnell, from 5,000 to 18,000 Filipino deaths and 500 to 650 American deaths during the march. The march was characterized by severe physical abuse and wanton killings. If an American or Filipino POW was caught on the ground or fell, he would be instantly shot. After the war, the Japanese commander, General Masaharu Hama, and 2 of his officers, Major General Yoshitaka Kawane and Colonel Kurataro Hirano, were tried by United States military commissions for war crimes and sentenced to death on charges of failing to prevent their subordinates from committing atrocities. Nama was executed in 1946, while Kawane and Herero were executed in 1949. It was not until the 27th of January 1944 that the U.S. government informed the American public about the march, when it released sworn statements of military officers who had escaped. The Bataan Death March and other Japanese actions were used to arouse fury in the United States. America would go on to avenge its defeat that occurred in the Philippines during the Battle of Leyte in October 1944, when General Douglas MacArthur famously promised to return to the Philippines, and he kept his word in February 1945. U.S. and Filipino forces went on to recapture the Bataan Peninsula, and Manila was liberated in early March. Number 10. The Hiroshima and Nagasaki atomic bombings. In the final chapter of World War II, the world bore witness to the devastating power of the atomic bomb. Today, we delve into the heart-wrenching tale of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki atomic bombings, events that forever altered the course of history and left a legacy of unimaginable suffering. It was the year 1945, and the world was at the brink of its most destructive conflict. In a bid to hasten the end of World War II, the United States dropped atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The immediate impact was catastrophic, with thousands of lives lost in the blink of an eye. The bombings killed between 129,000 and 226,000 people, most of whom were civilians, and remain the only use of nuclear weapons in an armed conflict. The bombings not only caused immediate death and destruction, but also unleashed a relentless wave of long-term suffering. Survivors faced the horrors of radiation sickness, with many experiencing severe health issues for the rest of their lives. The bombings ushered in a new era of warfare, one that demanded a reckoning with the devastating power of nuclear technology. The Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings stand as a stark reminder of the consequences of armed conflict and the devastating impact of nuclear weapons. And with that said, draws the end of our video on some of the worst events in history. If you made it this far, give yourself a pat on the back and a nice drink, you deserve it. Well, until next time, stay curious my friends, and I'll see you in the next one.